If you're like me, you've always got stuff swimming around in your bags, and I'm needing to find other littler bags to put inside to keep all my things like keys and AirPods and lipstick. So I decided let's make a cute knitting pattern out of it. This is the Polly Pocket Pouch. It fits in the palm of your hand and it will keep all of your essentials safe in your tote bag. It was originally published in the Q3 issue of Material Girls magazine, which is a free fiber art magazine that you can download in the description. There are other free knitting, crochet, and sewing patterns in there, as well as craft tutorials, project inspiration, loads of fun. So make sure to check it out. To make your pouch, you'll need some worsted weight yarn. I'm going to hold mine double with some mohair, but that's optional. I just like the fuzz. Also using 4mm knitting needles. They can be straight or circular, and some beads optionally if you would like to insert those. You'll also need a crochet hook that fits through the eye of your bead. So that's going to be custom to whatever size bead you have, but mine is 1.5mm because I have tiny little holes on mine. Started with a basic slip knot. I'm holding 2 strands together here, but again, that is totally optional. Just make sure you have both of your strands if you are holding double. I just cross my yarn over itself and pull up a loop which goes onto the knitting needle and tighten it on there. We're going to be using a long tail cast on. So wrap the tail of your yarn around your left thumb, place your needle underneath, then wrap the yarn that's connected to your ball around the needle before placing the loop around your thumb over the top of that needle. You're going to do this until you have 26 stitches lined up on the needle. Our first row is a basic knit row, so you're going to insert your needle from left to right through the stitch, wrap your yarn around, pull it back through, and pull that stitch off. That's a basic knit stitch, and we're going to do it across this entire row. When you get to the end, turn your whole needle around, and we're going to work on the back side with a purl row. To purl, you insert from right to left into the stitch, wrap your yarn around, pull it back through, and pull it off. I know this is going very fast, but you can keep watching over and over again if you don't know what a knit and purl stitch are yet. On row 3, we're going to insert some beads. So start by knitting the first 3 stitches. We're going to insert a bead on the 4th stitch. So leave it on your left-hand needle for now. Grab your bowl of beads and choose one out with your crochet hook. You're going to put the bead onto the crochet hook, then grab your needle again and take that 4th stitch off of the left needle. Scary, I know, but it'll be secure again in a second. Insert your crochet hook into the stitch and then pull the entire stitch through the eye of the bead. Like I said, my hole is very tiny, so I had to quite gingerly pull the stitch through with my tiny crochet hook. So this might be easier or harder depending on what beads you're using, but here I have the entire stitch pulled through and I'm going to place it back on the left-hand needle. It's secure right underneath the needle there, and I'm going to take up my right needle and knit through this stitch as normal. So by knitting over it, you are holding the bead securely underneath there, and you've inserted a bead. Knit another 3 stitches, and then on the 4th stitch, insert a bead. This is going to be the pattern across the row. Knit 3, insert on the 4th, and that ends up being inserted beads on the 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 20th stitches of row 3. I'll show you one more time here how I insert beads. So I have it sitting on my crochet hook. I'm taking the stitch off my left needle, placing it onto the crochet hook and pulling that entire stitch through the eye of the bead using the little notch on the end of the hook. Once the bead is on there, replacing that stitch back onto the left-hand needle so that it can be knitted as normal. It can definitely be a bit finicky, but I find it so relaxing once you get the hang of it and just satisfying to start seeing all the beads securely sitting there and lined up. Your first row should look something like this, all the beads secure and evenly spaced apart, very satisfying. Turn your work around and we're going to do a basic purl row for row 4. This is going to give our beads some room to breathe before we go in with another beaded row in row 5, but this time it's going to be a little bit different because we want to stagger when the beads come in to create the final pattern. So instead of inserting on the 4th stitch, we're going to insert first on the 6th stitch. And from there, it's still going to be every 4 stitches. We just have to start a bit later. So on this row, you're inserting beads on the 6th, 10th, 14th, 18th, and 22nd stitches. When you insert beads onto these stitches, they should land directly in between the 2 beads from row 3 that are below it, so it creates quite a nice pattern as we keep going. Here are 2 rows of completed beads. Now we're going to do one more purl row, and we're going to continue alternating between these 4 rows, rows 3 through 6, which I will put up on the screen now. So that is one beaded row, then a purl row, then another beaded row where the beads are offset in between, and a purl row. Continue doing that for 4 more times, which creates 10 total bead rows. How pretty is that? This is the basic body of the bag, and now we're going to create some holes to eventually put the ties through at the end. To do that, we need to cast off some stitches. So on this row, we're going to cast off every 4th stitch. So I'm knitting 1, 2, and 3 stitches. then knit the fourth stitch as well, and we're going to cast this one off by taking the stitch to the right, that third stitch, and pulling it over the fourth stitch. We're going to keep doing this, so knit 1, knit 2, knit 3, knit 4, okay, and then cast that fourth stitch off. This is going to make little holes across this whole row. At the end of the row, turn your work around. You'll be able to see where those holes are peeking out, and we need to top them off with some extra stitches here. So this is a purl row, and we're going to follow the pattern purl 3, yarn over. So I've purled 3 stitches. Now I'm just putting my yarn over my needle and continuing on with a purl. So as you keep going, you can see that this has created kind of another stitch on my needle. So when I come back on the next row, I'll be able to knit into that and make sure that these aren't just like gaping holes. They get finished off at the top. So again, you're yarning over after every 3 purls, and that is going to make up for the stitch that we cast off on the last row. Now we're going to start working on the frill on the next row. So turn your work around, and this is going to be a knit row, but we're going to do a technique called KFB, or knit front back. This is going to really suddenly increase our stitches. So insert as if you are to knit, and then pull your yarn back through, but instead of pulling it off, take your needle back and put it through right to left in the back of your stitch, pull some more yarn through, and then you can take the stitch off the needle. So here's that again. I'm putting it through as if to knit, but instead of pulling the stitch off, I'm going to the back to pull more yarn through and then pulling it off. So basically you're turning each stitch into 2 stitches. This is a great way to really suddenly increase a ton of stitches, and that's what we need to do to make more fabric and make it frill up really nicely. Knitting front and back in each stitch will double the stitches you have on this row. When you get to the end of it, turn it around, and we're just going to do a basic purl. It's important after increasing that much that you just let your stitches figure themselves out for a second, and then we can go back in and we're going to do a cast off, but this cast off involves adding some more stitches in as we cast off just for that extra bit of frill at the end. Turn it around, and we're going to start off like a basic cast off row by knitting 1 and then knitting 2. So you have 2 stitches on your right needle, and we're going to take the rightmost stitch over the left stitch to cast off. Now we have a new pattern to follow here. So I've yarned over, and then I'm going to cast off that yarn over, and then knit the next stitch, cast that off, yarn over, cast that off. Do you see what we're doing here? Continue the pattern of yarn over, cast off, knit 1, cast off to the end of the row, and by doing this we're going to cast the whole thing off while still adding a bunch of stitches in. As you go, you'll see that this creates a really nice frill. I especially like how it looks when it's all scrunched up like it will be when we put ties in and can tie the bag together with a bow. So continue across the rest of the row, and when you get to the end, take your needle out, you can cut your yarn and then pull that tail through the last loop that you have. This is the completed front of the bag, so you're only halfway there. Follow all the steps in this video up until now to make an identical back of the bag. Once you've got 2 of them, it's time to seam them together. I'm going to weave my ends in first just because I think that's easier than trying to weave them into an already made bag. So just attaching them to a tapestry needle, weaving the ends into the back, and then cutting them close so that it looks all nice and clean. We're going to seam these pieces together using horizontal and vertical invisible seams, which are invisible. Who would have thought? And that means you're going to barely notice them. So start with one side, line them up like so, and cut a new piece of yarn to use with your tapestry needle. If you're holding double, you do not need to do that with this, because this is going to be invisible. I'm cutting about twice the length of the area that I want to seam just to make sure I have enough, and we're going to start on this top edge here. So insert your needle into the right side and bring some yarn up, leaving a tail. We're going to weave this in later. Then go through to the left side, and we're going to pull the yarn up through there. To make this invisible, what you want to do is find the bar that is between each column of stitches. So it's a little hard to see here because we've increased so much with the frill, but as we get down a little lower, I'll show you what I mean. About halfway there, look how satisfying it is, how invisible this is. So what I'm doing is going into one side and finding a little bar of stitches. Here you can see between the 2 columns, stitches look like V's. In between those, there's a little bar that connects them. I'm putting my yarn underneath that and pulling it all the way through. So that was the left side. Now I'm going to go over to the right side, find that little bar that's in between the columns and keep going down. So once you get past the frill, you're going to want to do this always in the same column, and that's what's going to make it look so seamless. For the bottom, we're going to change slightly to the horizontal invisible seam since the stitches are sitting in a different direction. To do this, you want to put your needle underneath a whole stitch. So a stitch looks like a little V. You can see I have two sides there. I'm doing it on the right, and then going over to the left, finding a whole stitch to put my needle underneath that V. As we keep going, it's going to seam up nicely. Here's my corner, about a third of the way there, and I'm just going to keep going back and forth underneath those V's and pulling them together. Here's what she's looking like with two sides seamed. Pretty good, if I do say so myself. Then going up the next side, we're going to do the same as we did on the first side. So this is the vertical invisible seam where we're finding different bars in between the columns of stitches. When you get to the end, you can weave in whatever you have left to the back, cut it close, and then also weave in the side that we started on. And look at your little bag, check it out. Now it's time to add in a tie as the final touch. There are a few things that you can do to create your ties. So you could just cut a piece of string or ribbon and insert that through the holes. I'm going to crochet a chain because I want to keep that kind of crochet, knit, handmade look in here. Crocheting a chain is super simple if you don't know how. All you need is a crochet hook, and you're going to put a slip knot onto it and then wrap yarn around the top of the hook. Use the notch on it to pull that yarn through the loop that's already on your hook. So keep doing that and you'll build up a nice long chain very quickly. You want it to be about 20 inches or 50 centimeters long. I'm going to tie it off and then use a tapestry needle to weave my end up into the chain. Now we're ready to insert it into our bag. So I like to have my bow at the front of my bag, so I'm finding a hole that's in the middle and pulling my chain from front to back and then back through the next hole back to front. So we're going to go in and out like that all the way around, and it should end with your chain coming out the front so that you have two pieces hanging out. You can use that to scrunch up your frills, tie a bow. How cute did this turn out? I'm so obsessed with this pattern. If you liked this, you'll like the other knitting patterns that we've got going at Material Girls, so you can see them either on this YouTube channel or on materialgirls.com. Bunches of free cute knit accessories. I'm so excited to see your takes on this since there are so many options, doing it with beads, doing it without. I did one with a strand of glitter yarn. I put ribbon in instead of a crochet chain. So have so much fun with it, and thanks for watching.